Okay, so it's recording now. Awesome. So, hi guys, this is Dan from FBA Legends. I have Paul here with me, and Paul is an attorney. He's an executive director of Online Merchant Guide Guild. And is that right?
Yeah, so I'm an attorney. I represent a bunch of Amazon, a lot of Amazon folks in various issues, tax being the biggest one right now, which is sort of the core of my background. I come from tax litigation. And so I have my website, ecomattorneys.com, where people can reach out to me, but I also volunteer my time as sort of one of the founders of the Online Merchants Guild, which is a nonprofit or pending nonprofit organization that's basically trying to become the seller's voice, right? That there is a way to fight back against all of these sort of existential threats that are out there, all of these problems sellers are dealing with, whether it's state governments and their tax issues, whether it's fraudulent account suspensions, meaning other people basically filing false infringement claims against you or saying your products are bootleg or counterfeit, those types of things, and getting your account suspended. We're working on policies around that. We work on trade policy. We're working on how to deal with Amazon. There's an ability to sort of build a power base here. There's so many merchants out there, and so that's kind of our goal as an organization, is to sort of basically build that power base and then use it to our advantage so that we can sort of level the playing field and so that we can have a voice in the future of e-commerce. Because
awesome. Well, I have a few questions that are prepared here, and I'm sure the answers to those questions will help a lot of beginners in the industry. One of the questions that I see a ton about is the VAT.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people need to know what it is, where do you get it, why do you need it, what do you do with it essentially? So can you explain that?
So I'm just want to make sure I heard you correctly. You're saying VAT as in value-added tax, as in the European tax?
That's right.
Okay. So the VAT is comparable to a sales tax. It's sort of the European version of a sales tax. The Europeans follow what's called the credit invoice method, which is more like a sales tax, which means that every step of the way, the goods are taxed, and then as they sort of move on to the next phase, the tax is rebated back to the person all the way up until it gets to the consumer, and it's the consumer who ultimately pays the tax. When you engage in a taxable transaction, it's called making a supply, and so the person deemed making a supply is the person who's responsible for the tax. Currently, the view is, and I don't necessarily agree with this, is that Amazon, in an Amazon transaction, when you sell a product to a consumer, you're making a supply to that customer. So it's you who are responsible for collecting that tax. You're the importer. You're supplying a customer in the European country. You're responsible for collecting that tax. And so therefore you have to register in the most likely in all the countries. It depends. There's actually sort of a small threshold. I think it's like 80,000 euro, where you can actually report all of your transactions. I believe I have to double check this because it's usually a pretty small threshold.
Sure. Do you register the VAT in your own country, or do you have to
Well, you register in any country actually, and there's actually a strategy to what country you should register in. But yeah, you register in one country and you can basically do sort of a single report, but that threshold's pretty low, and you get past that pretty quickly. You find when your sales really kick up, and the only thing is it's always better if there's a way you can register in a country like Germany. I would strongly recommend it. Registering in countries like Greece and Italy make it very hard to get refunds if you're ever in a situation where you need to get a refund of your VAT. Typically, I think not retailer, but in terms of the person making a supply to the consumer, that's probably not very likely. But just sort of an FYI for those of you who have to collect that for other business purposes and subsequently request a refund when that product moves on, you should think about how to get that reporting into a country that's more quickly, it's going to sort of be more quick to issue refunds, right? Germany will issue refunds quickly. Greece, time takes a long time. They don't really want to give you the money back right away, as we see and that political climate actually makes a difference.
No, that was good. That was a good explanation. That kind of leads me to the next question, and that's probably another big one. Why should you have an incorporation? Why do you want to incorporate your business?
Sure. The number one reason people want to incorporate is liability protection, right? They want to protect themselves from creditors, whether it's creditors they do business with, whether it's a product liability. If your product hurts somebody, you could be sued. Corporations are
big
great.
article,
Yes.
I believe, just recently.
Yes. Big product liability suit. Amazon, right? Product defect caused, it's when the hoverboard batteries went on fire, the person's house burned down. The seller disappeared basically, and so they're suing Amazon to recover. And Amazon apparently won, at least at the lower court level. It still remains to be seen what happens. But Amazon won, basically saying that they're not responsible. They're not really a part of the transaction. They're more just sort of a marketplace. That, of course not. But if you read the opinion, it's actually pretty bad. But what that tells us is that Amazon, I sort of joke, it's like Amazon's bulletproof. I mean, it's impossible to win in court against Amazon. It just seems that way, at least. And so you have to think about, okay, well, if you're a lawyer and I'm going to sue somebody because my client, is claiming they were injured by a product, I'm going to look to you, the seller. That's where I'm going, because Amazon might have deeper pockets, but I'm going to have a heck of a lot easier time recovering from you and your business insurance policy. Hopefully you have a business insurance policy. But to the extent I can go above that, I might, and that's where the corporation certainly comes in handy, because if they can, if the damage award is 10 million and your insurance policy is only for 1 million, well, there's 9 million there. They may not get all 9 million from you, but they're going to take what they can from you. So having a first level corporation or entity of some kind, whether it's an LLC or C Corp, is important, but it's not enough. I mean, there's with single member LLCs, meaning you're the sole owner of the LLC, or maybe you and your wife own the LLC, then it's technically not single member. But those sort of closely held LLCs, it's easy. Good lawyers can pierce the corporate veil and they can get through that. So it requires a lot more strategy, and not so much that you need more LLCs per se, but if you have a house, if you have a family, if you have kids, right, and you have assets, and these are things you work really hard for, you may want to think about how to structure your affairs before going into business in a way that protects you. Maybe you need certain types of trust, not revocable trust, but trust that prevent creditors from going after those assets you've already worked so hard to build up. And so, that's why you just can't go to LegalZoom. You really do need to talk to a lawyer and figure out, okay, what's the best way for me to handle my situation, because everybody's situation is completely different. For example, if you live in Florida, Florida actually has basically what they call a Homestead Protection. Basically, no creditor can go after your home in Florida. So if your primary residence is in Florida and you get sued and all you're at and everything you own, your total net worth is basically is the equity of your home, it's going to be pretty much impossible, nothing's guaranteed, but for a creditor to come after your home. So you've already protected that, but that's a Florida thing. That's not a, Massachusetts thing. So, things like that have to come into consideration. But if your assets are elsewhere, you need to think about ways to protect yourself from that. So, just sort of getting the LegalZoom special LLC is not enough. And what I find with my clients, as with every area, whether it's IP, intellectual property, trademark, and patent, you just want to, the things you do on the front end you end up being really glad that you did it. It's sort of like a Murphy's Law thing, right? If you spend the money, you may never ever realize the benefit you got by hiring a lawyer on the front end, but when you don't and things go wrong, you really wish you did on the front end.
And it's very cheap to do, so it's like $300-$400 for the incorporation.
I mean, that's the filing fee. I think I know some lawyers charge a lot more. They charge like $7,000, $8,000. So I can see the deterrence from that. I certainly don't. My practice is sort of an investment practice, so I invest in my clients because I think that I want to build a client relationship for life.
Right.
So if I have a client who's is just starting out, it's not going to be, hey, give me $8,000 to get you incorporated and get you some level of protection. It's going to be tailored to that situation. So that's kind of how I like to run my practice. My colleagues, the accountants that I like to work with, are the same way. We understand this industry. I've been a seller. I was a seller since in 2004 when I was in law school. I made a lot of money as a seller. So I've been there, and I totally understand what it's like. And I've done FBA plenty, and I get the struggles, and I get what people
So just to summarize your answer, essentially, you obviously recommend doing it. It's cheap to like 300, 400 bucks to file the corporation, but that's not everything. You should consider also doing an insurance of some sort,
Yes.
especially on what product you have too.
Right. No, yeah, I mean, it's the $300 or $400 fee to file the incorporation. I just don't suggest you do it on LegalZoom. I suggest you sit down with a lawyer, have a consultation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about your, understand your personal situation. Now I'll be honest with you. I mean, if you really are like, if you're just out of college and you have nothing, like you're just kind of, starting out your life, maybe for a short while, the LegalZoom special will be enough for you, right? Because, you're trying to get in, it's a low barrier to entry. But, as you grow successful and as you sort of, build up your net worth, there's a sort of a tipping point or sort of a critical moment where you need to start thinking, okay, well, now I should start doing this, because the time to think ahead and time to protect yourself is before things happen. Because when things happen and you're not protected, it's usually too late. So whether you want to do it ahead of time or not, like I said, I mean, the way I do it is I'm not going to charge a college kid $8,000 to file a corporation.
And aside from the whole protection layer and everything, that's a great way to defer taxes. Like,
absolutely. I mean, there's some real tax advantages to being a corporation. Well, not being a corporation, but being a certain type of entity. It also does depend on your situation, but right, you do want to consider entity structures for that reason, which is why as a tax lawyer, I love helping people, because, the tax nerd in me gets to come out and say, okay, well, this is really good. Maybe, maybe you want to be an LLC with what they call an S-Corp election, which could be good for saving on certain payroll related taxes. So it just depends on your situation, but absolutely there's tax consequences as well. And there's also tax consequences to being a C Corp. I mean, it may make sense for you. It may not. You may end up paying more taxes because you're C Corp, because of the extra layer of taxation that's still there.
Right. That's a great way to explain it. I personally incorporated my business, and what I also do, aside from the protection, aside from all the benefits, taxes, it also allows you to open different brands as an umbrella under the corporation. So you don't have to keep incorporating different new companies if you start a product.
Well, it's interesting because that's it's interesting, and I would encourage you to talk to some folks about that, because as your brands get more successful, more valuable, you may want to actually start dividing things up into different corporations. And again, it's scale, right? I mean, if you really have high value brands, then the cost and burden of having to deal with multiple entities is probably going to be fairly minimal compared to the protection you're getting, because C Corps and LLCs protect you personally, but who's protecting your business, right? When that creditor comes after you, right, they're going to go after you and they're going to go after your business, right? If you have an LLC, well, the LLC is still liable. So if you have valuable assets in the LLC, those are all subject to, creditor liability. So you're going to want to take steps to sort of further enhance what we call the sort of the submarine effect, or the compartmentalization within your LLC, so that, assets are protected. Maybe you want to set up an IP company, maybe you want to set up a financial company for your finances, for your treasury, for your cash, and an operating company. I mean, it's so dependent on everyone's situation, but that's, if your money is in your company and your value is in your company, the LLC isn't going to protect that. The LLC, if it even works, because as I said, holding a closely held LLC does not guarantee you the protection that many say it does. You're still not protecting the assets within the LLC, so those are still at risk.
Got it. Okay. All right. The next question I have here is, I see that a lot too. We sell mainly in the U.S., but personally, I'm located in Canada. So people that are outside of the U.S. And they want to sell in the U.S. market, where do they pay taxes?
Sure. So it's an interesting situation. So depending, in the case of most Amazon sellers, and I like to use the term merchants, Online Merchants Guild, we're fighting, the tax issue is a huge issue for us. It's a huge issue for my clients. I come from corporate tax litigation. I've litigated cases against the states. I've defended against IRS for Microsoft, Walmart, GE. I've been doing this for a long time. And, so from the Online Merchants Guild perspective, we're trying to fight for your rights. And we actually have an amicus brief that you should check out and read about how sort of, basically telling the Supreme Court in this tax case that, you're not responsible for the tax. Obviously everyone's situation is different, But from a constitutional law perspective, there's some serious problems with what the states have been doing with the FBA sellers. But that said,
would I be making sales and receiving the income from Amazon and paying my tax in Canada?
Right, that's where I was going. Right. So in terms of what you actually have to do, I'm sorry for that diversion, but it's such a tax is such a big issue right now.
Of course.
From an income tax perspective, federally, there are treaties out there that would most likely be applicable to you that would probably prevent foreign income from being taxed at the U.S. level, right? We have certain tax treaties that would say, okay, well, you may not have a permanent establishment, which is sort of like nexus from the sales tax perspective or income tax perspective in the United States. So you're sort of protected by treaty, but from a state and local perspective, those treaties don't apply. So you could still have a state income tax liability problem, and you could also have a requirement to collect the sales tax from your U.S. customers. Again, I don't think it's constitutional, but in terms of what the states, if you were to ask a state what they thought, and states are wrong a lot, but again, if you gotta win, you gotta assert your rights. But if you were to ask a state, am I responsible for the tax? I'm in Canada. They would say, well, if your products are in an FBA warehouse in my state, then you're supposed to collect sales tax from your customers and you're supposed to pay income tax. The problem is the cost of doing that is astronomical. In 20 states, right? Let's just say, was it 24 states that say have an FBA warehouse right now? And let's say that's the cap for now. It could be thousands of dollars per state to file income tax returns.
Of course. But here's the interesting thing. As a seller, when we set up the prices, we don't actually set what tax rate or anything like that. It's just kind of all automatic.
No, Amazon sort of is kind of interesting. What they've sort of done is they have the power to tag, they have the power to turn on the tax button, but they've sort of given you the free will to do it. Okay. And by doing so, they claim that they're not responsible for collecting tax. They're merely a marketplace. Again, legally problematic, but right now the states are buying it, and that's a whole other can of worms we can get into another time. Yeah. You actually can read my Supreme Court brief and see some of what the issues are there. But if we're going off of what the current view is from the state perspective, you're supposed to turn on that button, you're supposed to collect the tax, and you're supposed to file a tax form. So you've got to file sales tax, not just in every state that has a sales tax, which is 45, but you also remember there's sub-jurisdictions. There's over 10,000 taxing jurisdictions, and I think it's over 500 of them are like little mini states. Like they're actually separate from the state. So you don't just file one form and tell them what locations. You have a Baton Rouge Department of Revenue that you got to deal with in Baton Rouge Parish, Louisiana. You've got a Jefferson Parish, Louisiana Department of Revenue, Colorado, Alabama, same thing. Yep. So you're filing tax returns in like all of these jurisdictions, and the cost it gets up there. I mean, imagine having to file hundreds of tax returns.
What would you recommend? Would you recommend us to turn this button on, or first of all, where do you even find this button? But once we find it, do we need it?
It's in Seller Central. It's an option. If you were to ask me what I think from a constitutional law perspective, it's complete crap. There's no way, small businesses have to be required to do this.
So bottom line is you should only really worry about this kind of stuff when you're really up there making $100,000+ a month kind of thing.
Right, because in those instances, again, still not the law that they should be collecting, but there's sort of a cost
gray line.
Right, but even then, but I think honestly the real answer right now is we have this Supreme Court case. We might see a decision tomorrow, but it's going to come out before the 30th of June. So I would say just stay tuned. I mean, don't do anything quite yet. Why don't we just see what the court says and then go from there?
You pay taxes in your own country at least for now.
Yeah, I mean, your country laws are totally different. I mean, Australia fixed the problem by just basically making Amazon pay the GST.
Yeah.
2 states, Washington and Pennsylvania, cure the problem by making Amazon collect the sales tax, which is one of the reasons why it's unconstitutional, because they're burdening the hell out of you. Pardon my language, but they're burdening the heck out of you to make you collect this tax. It could cost you over $100,000 a year to file the sales tax and income tax returns that the states want you to file, which is a non-starter for most merchants and really kills the sort of entrepreneurial nature of what we're trying to do, which is why, again, it's unconstitutional, especially because all they could do is they could have Amazon collect the tax. There's ways they could have simplified the process so it doesn't cost you $100,000. The states have a requirement to not, we call burden interstate commerce. So they have to basically take steps. If they want their tax revenue, then they're gonna have to figure out a way to do it that's easy, or they're gonna have to work with Amazon, or they can't just say, you know what, we're incapable, we're dysfunctional, and so therefore entrepreneurialism in America is going to die. That's exactly the exact reason why we have a constitutional commerce clause. And so, you know, I'm confident. I think that it's important for people to support Online Merchants Guild for that reason, because one of the next things we'll be doing once Wayfair happens is we're going to be suing California, we're going to be suing Washington, and we're going to be asserting your constitutional rights, because that's the way you do it. I mean, no one client of mine wants to spend $500,000, which is what this costs. I don't get the money. I have to pay at the law firms, but that's what it costs to litigate on a low end, what it costs to litigate a state tax case, at least. Right. Nobody wants to pay that individually, and nor should they. Why not? If it's a common issue that affects all of us as merchants, sellers, merchants, why don't we all tackle it together? Why don't we all just chip in? We join the guild, and collectively we use the revenue we get from our members to hire the right lawyers and assert your constitutional rights, so that everybody can sell, so that we can keep that window of opportunity to be successful on Amazon, eBay, Shopify open for everybody.
Right. Okay, awesome. No, I think this is crazy information here. Next, I have one last question here.
Sure.
Trademarks. So most people understand what a trademark is, but they're not sure why they should get it. What is your opinion on it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand why you wouldn't get it. If you're expecting, if you're trying to get a brand, I mean, if you're just sort of, you know, just trying to sort of, somebody's making something, you're going to make the same thing because it's not patented, and just trying to cash in on a trend, that's a different story. But if you're trying to develop your brand, right? You know, a good friend of mine and one of the co-founders of Online Merchants Guild is a guy named Bernie Thompson. You might see him when you log into Seller Central. He's been featured a lot over the last couple of months.
Yeah.
He founded a company called Pluggable. It's one of the oldest private label companies. Pluggable is a brand. It's a valuable brand. People know what a pluggable product is. You probably buy one. It's basically any type of USB device, right? When it's $50 to buy the Apple adapter for the new computers, he's going to have it there for $15 or $20. You know what I mean? And that's the Pluggable brand. So he's got a real brand. And if he hadn't trademarked that, then there would be you would have no rights to it. You wouldn't have the ability to sort of say, I'm pluggable and I'm different than these knockoffs, those, you know, cheapo, you know.
And that's the way to also fight them if they replicate your stuff.
Well, that's the patent side of things. So patent, and there's two types of patents you have to consider, right? Because if they replicate your stuff, right? Trademark is replication of your brand, right? Big picture. Patent is replication of your stuff, right? So if you invent something that's novel.
But if you private label, then you obviously don't have the patent, and maybe you research there's no patents for it, but you want a private label, and then you create your brand. But if you don't trademark it, somebody can steal your pictures with your brand on it.
Exactly. Right. You have nothing to fall back on to stop that person, to exclude that person. And then with patents, it's the same thing. I mean, there's two types of patents. There's a utility patent, which we typically think of as the invention itself, which probably the thing might have already been invented. But there's also something called a design patent. So like if yours looks a certain way, which kind of goes to your brand, right? Like if you design your product to be a certain way. I'll give you a great example. I had a client who developed a product that you know, made ice balls or something like that.
Okay.
And the way he designed it, you know, potentially violated somebody's patent, design patent, because of the way it was designed, and had, you know, in advance you know, we looked at it and said, hey, could you make one change to it? It wouldn't have done that. So they had already invested in the manufacturing, only to find out that there's another company that told Amazon that there was, you know, filed infringement.
Lots of money was wasted already at that point.
Wasted, exactly, and it could have been prevented. It's a perfect example of why you should check your IP before you go live, and that's why, you know, I'm not an IP lawyer.
Or even order from the supplier in this case.
Exactly, but I'm not an IP lawyer, but my partner is, and he's like me. He's ex-Microsoft. I mean, he was, you know, chief IP counsel to the chief architect, so he was like at Bill Gates level, you know, IP. So, you know, he's very, very plugged into the issues, and my clients absolutely love working with him because he's very quick to spot the issues and help, not just to spot the issues. He's not trying to shoot you down. He's actually trying to help you find the solution. So find the workaround. What do you need to do to sort of make sure that you can do what you want to do? Because that's what a good lawyer does. They're trying to help you succeed, not just be a barrier, not just be sort of a what do they say? A
obstacle.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess what you're saying. Cool. Well, you answered all my questions really thoroughly. At this point, that's all the questions I've written. Do you have anything else you want to add, maybe?
No, I mean, again, just, encourage you to come and reach out to me, and, go
Paul is
to.
in our group, so you guys can message him directly or message in the group. I'm sure you'll.
Exactly. Yeah, I have a group, online tax questions for merchants. We're building our e-com attorneys group. We're building our group for pads, but certainly join Amazon tax questions for merchants. And even if it's not a tax question, post it in the meantime, and we'll get on it. Check out ecomattorneys.com, which is rayfulsonlaw.com. I'm Paul at rayfulsonlaw.com, which is my last name, the word law.com. Send me an email. And let's start a conversation, and if we can help you, we'll help you, and we'll, depending on where you are, I mean, we want to work with you, and we want to build a relationship with you, so we're not here to gouge you and charge you $8,000.
I have a feeling you're going to be tagged in a lot of posts related to legal issues now with every Facebook group beginner that we have in our group there.
Hey, that's great. I appreciate it. We're a new practice, and we've just found that, my practice, the way I run my practice, the way I focus it is I get experts who, people who are unquestionable experts in what they do, right? When people, sell, when you're ready to sell your Amazon business, right? Yeah. My M&A experts have worked on multi-billion-dollar deals for huge companies. We know due diligence in and out from a buyer perspective. We know how to structure the deal. We know how to negotiate the deal so that you're not leaving money on the table. We don't just take your income and multiply it by some multiple and say that's your value. No. We really dissect your company and look for those points of value and try to help you value those individual pieces.
Very knowledgeable. That's good.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is what we do. It's what we've been doing for the huge companies. We're now trying to scale it down so that you guys know that you're not, you're getting the real experts, people who really have been doing this for a very long time, and are trusted by multi-billion-dollar companies to do what they do. So certainly want you to have that sense of trust with us, that we're going we're going to provide you with excellent service and make sure that your best interests are looked after.
Awesome, Paul. Well, I really, really appreciate your time with us, and I hope we talk again soon, not about any issues, but about more questions.
Anytime, absolutely, anytime. Great talking to you, and yeah, all the best.
All right, we'll see you in the group.
See you in the group. Take care. Bye.